This is All Things Esoteric, episode 25. I am here with Kate.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Hey,
And I
Anthony.
and I am Anthony. This is April 25th, 2024, and we're going to talk about Chiron today. We're going to get into the mythology, critically analyzing some ancient authors. We will be looking at the astrological meanings, the symbology, looking at some charts today. And to start, Kate's going to tell us a little bit about the chart right now.
All right, thank you. I hope everyone is doing well as we're navigating these very interesting times and events that are transpiring in the public domain. We're going to be getting into a little bit about that tonight. I want to just do a mini review of April, because if you have followed any astrology or any astrologers, most of us agree that April is the most pivotal month in the entire year. There's a lot going on, and a lot of events have occurred that are one-time events or events that don't occur often. So I want to start by talking about Pluto, our most outermost planet, that takes 248 years to make its traverse around the zodiac wheel. And if you've been listening to us, we have followed Pluto's journey and everything that Pluto's been doing. So I'm not going to reiterate all that, except to say Pluto has moved out of Capricorn, which was hugely significant, simultaneously connecting to the United States of America's Pluto return. And what that means is Pluto returned to its original place within the United States chart. And what that means is 248 years have traversed, and that brings us back to revolutionary energies. So the age of Capricorn, so to speak, top down authority, where government is involved. It's a huge public house where we place a lot of our daytime activities in our career. So it is a cardinal earth house ruled by Saturn. Now we have moved into Pluto into Aquarius. Huge event. Go back and listen to those. Or again, just search that out. What does it mean when Pluto's in Aquarius? You're going to see all kinds of wonderful videos out there. We have Pluto in Aquarius at 2 degrees. I am in New York, New York. Chart time, 6:30 p.m., April 25th, 6:30 is when I pulled this. So we've got about 20 minutes that have moved, but nothing's really moving that's significant to make a difference. So what we have here is Pluto sitting in the 4th house in Aquarius within the house of home. The part of the chart, now if you're in other areas of the country, this could move and change. So you need to look that for yourself. It definitely would. Right now, he's sitting, Hades himself, in the 4th house. So this is the darkest part of the chart. This is the subterranean part of the chart. This is the dark, dark time. So Pluto's hidden down there, dealing with themes as it transits that 4th house and there, and therefore our roots, and is very concerned about the moon, which connects to Cancer, which is our instincts. And who we really are is our moon in our chart, how our emotional system responds. So themes of things that are of an intimate nature, things that can't be seen, are being highlighted with Pluto wanting to be transformed. We have Pluto, as of January 20th, moved into Aquarius. It's going to sit there till September 1st and then retrograde. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is going to go back. We're going to see whenever this happens, when a huge planet like Pluto slows down and begins to move the opposite direction, and changes signs. This is a reworking of Capricorn. One last look before we launch forward November 19th, 2024 into Aquarius, where we stay for 44 years. Not ever going to go back. We will never see in this lifetime, any of us, Pluto and Capricorn again. So we just made it through a very significant time in history, and a very significant time. And I can only speak to the USA because that's the chart I really look at, because I'm connected to it intimately, having been born here. It is my home, my birthplace, and a very serious time indeed for the United States of America and anyone who lives in the United States, especially with Pluto in the fourth house home there. And the USA chart is a Cancer sun ruling the fourth house. You see these ties and these connections through layers. Okay, so then we had, I'm going to move off of Pluto because Pluto's just going to be hanging out there and then moving, like I said, retrograde September 1st and then forward again November 19th to stay. So when we finally clear through, let me say this one last thing, clear through 2024, it's monumental for a lot of people, and a big, huge time of a collective time. And you'd have to look at the signs. I'm not going to go into all that, but there's been collective signs that have had to go through some really tough times. And they are now finding release, and we're moving into the air and fire signs more dominant, where those signs will have more of an interception than the water and earth. Of course, all 12 signs are always within the zodiac and all 4 elements always interacting, but we see predominance and we see transits where energies lean towards a certain modality or a certain element in a certain house. And we know then that this is really important to look at. So we have a solar eclipse event that took place April 8th. I think everybody probably knows about that event. It was huge. I mean, it was, for the first time in my life, I really never saw a solar eclipse event be so publicized, so talked about, so brought to the forefront, even by mainstream media. Like, it was out there.
It was strange.
Beckoning us to say, hey, wasn't it? It didn't feel like, it was like, okay, we've had these events before, but I don't know. No. And it could also be because we are in such a time of exchange with the internet and social media and everything, maybe that it's more predominant.
I don't know about that. Eclipses are nothing new. We've had plenty of them before. They've never canceled schools or sent National Guards, and they were doing news stories telling people to make sure you have cash on hand and, stock up on food. Like, that's crazy for an eclipse.
Yeah, I'm going to go to that day really quick and pull that chart up, but I want to say this, and while I'm saying things from this point on, I want you to think about Diddy, okay? I really do. This isn't a podcast where I'm bad mouthing him or trying to go down that road. There's a lot of people out there covering this. I'm looking at it from an astrological perspective and a cultural, social perspective, and the events that are occurring. Just think of what's happening out there in the world and how the heck these are connected. So April 8th, we had this solar eclipse, 19 degrees in Aries. It was directly conjunct, which means the same degree right next to Chiron, which is in Aries that we're covering this evening. The sun was connected to Chiron and the moon was connected because it was an eclipse. So what we have here is a 19-degree Chiron solar eclipse in Aries. Diddy has a Chiron in Aries at I think 2 or 3 degrees. I didn't look at the exact degree. I don't go too deep into his chart because he doesn't have a birth time. And without a birth time, there's so much that could change. The ascendant changes. So within minutes, it could be something else and shift the entire blueprint. So you can't read the houses. All you can do is read those outer planets that we know wouldn't have moved and the asteroids that don't move very quickly. And that would be Chiron. So we know he has an Aries Chiron. His Mars in his natal chart, his Mars is the sextile Neptune, and Mars is the ruling lord over Aries. Uranus is opposite Chiron. Mars is sextile Chiron. Neptune is trine Chiron, and Pluto is opposite Chiron. So whatever Chiron's doing, more than likely, it's going to be important for him because he has so many aspects in communication of a challenging nature going on with Chiron in his own natal blueprint. And that's really obvious to see that. And because I don't know his exact birth time, I really couldn't pull his chart. Now, I've seen astrologers put his Scorpio sun on the ascendant degree and do what's called a solar reading, which are the general energies of what Scorpio is going through right now. And then, of course, to get a more closer reading, you take the true transits and you place them on top of the natal chart, and then you see where they're hitting you personally. So Sun conjunct Moon, Chiron at 19 degrees in Aries, along with Mercury being in retrograde, which means communications, exchange of information is being reviewed. Was he having information being reviewed, and is he currently having information being reviewed by the federal government and law authorities? Yes, he is. Where is Mercury? Mercury is right in that stellium of Aries in retrograde. You can't make this up, man. So this will be the last total solar eclipse that's visible from the contiguous United States until 2044. How ironic when Pluto moves out of Aquarius. We will have another solar eclipse. I didn't look when that is. And then a shift of Pluto going into Pisces. Pretty interesting, huh? All right, then we had in April the Jupiter and Uranus conjunction, which happens every 14 years. This occurs. So it's a cycle of 14 years. Think about this now. A cycle concerning Jupiter and Uranus. They were at the exact degree, April 20th, and Jupiter represents that 9th house of the zodiac, and Pisces, Uranus, the 11th house of the zodiac. So we also had, and I'm going to hit this Jupiter and Uranus back in a minute, but I want to get through this, the few other things that are going to be happening. We just had a full moon, the 23rd, in Scorpio. And we know that Scorpio, I would love to have seen where that full moon lined up with his chart, but Scorpio, of course, does look at all things that are dark and hidden and not seen and concerned with Pluto, not so much Mars, although there's an argument in older astrology where they say Pluto is the higher octave of Mars. Mars in Aries is a completely different look than Mars and Pluto. And so I see Definitely Mars there, but it's a completely different identification. It's just two different ways to express that energy, much like Mercury with Gemini and Virgo. So Pluto, definitely down there in the fourth, is trining what house? The eighth. And on that solar eclipse, Uranus and Jupiter were in the eighth house. So today, April 25th, Mercury went direct in Aries. How about that? And we were talking offline before we started recording that, we tried to record this. We had made attempts, and that often happens with us where, we'll schedule it and then maybe something comes up and we have to change it and we're just flexible. We don't have a set schedule. So we just go with the flow. And we always know that when we do connect, it always just seems to be the right time. And wouldn't you know it, Mercury is out of retrograde, which means communication can now move forward.
Wow.
And yeah, it's just unbelievable. It's station direct. So Wednesday, April 29th, Mars enters Aries. We have this fiery energy who owns Aries coming out of Pisces. And we're going to see a lot of fire in the Aries sign. And if I had to call it, you're going to see a lot of anger and explosiveness in regards to Aryan energy, in regards to, where the moon was and where the sun was and where Chiron was in the North Node and Venus, all in Aries on the eclipse. You have this huge stellium of Aries energy with the North Node in retrograde, saying, look, wherever you place your aim, Aries, wherever you put your northern star, Aries, back it up, man. We're going to review, and we're going to review a while with communication and investigation. Quite right. There's no doubt about it. With Chiron there, these are things that go very, 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 very deep back to childhood. And as I sat with this energy today and was finalizing my notes, I just had a wave of, it just came over me about Diddy. And just to say his childhood, something in his childhood, something happened in his childhood with his identity. I think that perhaps he might have been very abused, and that might come out. I can't tell because I really don't pull his chart. I got to have a time, and I don't have time to rectify it. Not going to do that. So it's a perfect time to be recording with Mercury coming towards us in Aries and Mercury being released and Mars coming towards Aries. This Uranus-Jupiter conjunction that is just absolutely revealing what's happening out there. So let's just talk a minute about that. Did you want to say anything before I go into Jupiter and Uranus quick? And then we get into this mythology. All right. So Jupiter, let's just talk about this a minute. Right now in the 8th house, Eastern Standard Time, New York, we have Uranus and Jupiter conjunct 22 degrees in Taurus in the 8th house. So it's trining back down there to the 4th house. And we have Pluto there and Charlico. Now, Charlico, I think Charlico, yes, pardon me. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce her. I've heard it several ways, but Charlico is another asteroid. And that asteroid just so happened to be married to Chiron. So she's down there in Aries with Pluto in Aquarius, pardon me, not in Aries, in Aquarius, in the 4th house, trining up to this Jupiter and Uranus. It is a steady flow of energy. Uranus is not a steady flow of energy. Uranus is quick and eccentric and shock and awe and sudden movements. So it's almost like she's in that home where it's the darkest of the dark. And incidentally, on the cusp of the fourth is Ceres herself, the great mother. Listen to our podcast on the 4 main asteroid goddesses, Ceres, Pallas, Juno, Vesta, that we did. And we go over this really extensively, each one of them. And with Ceres on one side, Charlica on the other, and Pluto in between them, this is a lot of motherly concern and deep, deep emotional wounding. People have been really, really affected by this, is what I'm saying. Now, wherever, we have Pluto, we have a lot of underbelly currents. Listen to our episode on Pluto. And we go into those dark caves of Pluto. And with Pluto being dark energy, in an Aquarian, we the people sign, Uranus is Aquarius's planet with Saturn, and it's trining his planet. This energy is profound. Jupiter, known as the great benefic, bringing fullness, growth, progression, elevation, higher mind, philosophy, astrology, teaching, education, the guru, God, the house of God, the 9th house, success, good fortune, honor, recognition, wellness, joy, happiness, pride, inflated pride and overconfidence, inflation and excess, too much. And I think that the information coming out from 8th house scorpionic themes of the psyche and wanting to get to the bottom of things, trotting over to the 4th house of home and mother, where the wound begins with Chiron. It is a birth wound that Chiron experiences. Chiron does not receive his wound. His wound is there at birth. He comes into the wound. So higher culture and communications of all kinds. These are the rich. In Taurus, these are the wealthy. The wealthy, and Venus rules Taurus, and with Jupiter there, too much excess. Too much Venus, too much lust and sex. And that's exactly what we're hearing. And we must tie into Venus and money and how our own United States economic situation is absolutely in peril. I'm not going to go into that, but this is fact. This is fact, and it is due to, I believe, too much debt, for one thing. All right. We have the Greek god Zeus in Jupiter, king of the Olympus, the king of the Olympians, and the Roman Jupiter. This is Sagittarius, is the great centaur's home. This is mutable fire. Chiron is in Aries in cardinal fire. So this is fire on fire energy here being emitted, and fire energy that is large in Jupiter expands, and Chiron is expanding Aries wounds. How? Well, let's look at Uranus. Uranus represents Aquarius, the 11th house of the zodiac. This is a fixed air house. We see the man with the picture, masculine, world have the secret inner knowledge in the 8th house in a large way, in erotic ways, coming out from the truth bearer himself, being poured out on the world. And wouldn't you know it, Pluto, the ruler of the 8th, is in Aquarius. Inner individuality and uniqueness is assigned to Uranus. Highly, highly intuitive. This is the higher octave of Mercury. This is brilliance, high IQ, genius level intelligence, highly creative, as it's the elevation of Mercury, and ways of exchange. We, the people, the 11th house, concerned with the others. Creative project expressed as inspiration or strong rebellion. This is breaking through societal cultures to become an individual, independent and original. This is sudden change, sudden shock, sudden awe, sudden opening, sudden awakening, brilliance, strong rebellion, and going against the current societal streams. Eccentricity, pardon me. Technological advancement in high degrees. Electricity, instability, unpredictability, huge, unpredictability. I have seen transits of Uranus, and you do not know what could possibly happen there at times. Like you're trying. It's an unpredictable energetic signature. Strong impulses toward the new, the unexpected, the disruptive. So this is the creator, rebel, trickster archetype here. The Greek sky god Uranus and Prometheus, which I did not know until today. This is, I don't even know what to say that it's Prometheus. There's something more to that I didn't dig, but the astrologist Richard Tarnas says this of the conjunction of those two energetic signatures I just read, Jupiter, Uranus, a sense of being unconstrained by all limits, over the top. Okay, was that Diddy's behavior that he's being accused of? No, I'm not saying he did it. I don't know. Well, we're going to find out. But these are the allegations by many people now, not just one, not just two, but some credible individuals. And over the top, going off the deep end, excessive gambling, extreme optimism, gone rogue, drive for excessive change and variety. Whenever we look at Chiron, we have to look at Uranus, and we have to look at Saturn, because that is where Chiron orbits, is between Saturn and Uranus, and we'll get back to that in a minute. Manic energy, sudden excessive wealth or fame. Yeah, with Jupiter there, boy, this is winning the lottery right there. I bet you somebody's going to win a big lottery, and I bet you if we pull their transits with their chart, you're going to see that it's going to hit their money houses. Also, very important to note, where Jupiter and Uranus are conjunct at 22 degrees in Taurus in the 8th house, is other people's money. Diddy was a producer, and he had other people's money. He's a Scorpio. His archetype is the 8th house there, and he's going to be about other people's money. It's known to be that house. Excessive wealth or fame, too much too fast, unexpected major changes or disruption, superficial glitter and dazzle, Richard Tarnas says, fool's gold, desire for instant success, inflated drive for unfettered freedom beyond all responsibilities, limitations, disastrously overconfident risk-taking, Icarus. Icarus. Do you know the myth of Icarus?
Yes.
He is the myth of Icarus. This is what happened. If it's true,
Chiron?
he is. Diddy.
Hmm.
Diddy is the myth of Icarus. Yes. Yes. Icarus flew
Yeah.
too close to
Let me
the
see it like that.
sun, and it melted his wings and brought him down. Yes. So, with Jupiter representing the 9th and the 12th houses, because Jupiter rules over Pisces as well, not just Sagittarius. And Pisces is the 12th house, which is mutable water. We have mutable fire and mutable water, and fire and water hitting each other. What happens? Steam. Steam. And we're seeing as if the Neptunian fog of Pisces was also attributed clear. And, we're starting to see some truth. So we also see the 12th house is spoken as the house of karma. So energy there is quite powerful, and it can utterly transform a landscape. It can be directly tied to someone's karma. It's the result of our actions being played out in front of us. That is what karma is. Karma isn't like something that's going to happen to you. Karma already happened. Right now, those listening, you're in karma. So take a moment to think about what is exploding all over the place in regards to what I just said. And apparently he didn't do this alone. There was an entourage of individuals, which is interesting because we have a whole lineup of planets over there we've got Saturn on the cusp of the 5th, cusp of the 6th here almost. It goes Saturn, Mars, Neptune, North Node, Mercury, Chiron, Venus, Sun, part of Fortune, Uranus, and Jupiter. All in a row in the signs of, starting at the bottom, Pisces, Aries, and Taurus. So you see, now think about this when you look at the wheel and you go from the 12th and the 1st to the 2nd. Those are themes there of what we're dealing with. And in the middle of it is house number 1, Aries. And that is where it becomes extremely, extremely personal. That's all I have for the sky map. I know that was a lot, but an unprecedented month. I can't believe I'm living through it. It's pretty exciting time to be alive, to be honest. But
definitely seems strange.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not stretching it at all. I held a lot back that I could say there's so many other aspects going on here, but I don't want to take that much time. But I took a longer amount of time just because of everything happening. And we're seeing a lot of changes. And so if it feels really crazy out there, just know it's perfectly normal. And what can you do with the cosmos? Can you reach your hand up and stop Saturn from moving forward in Pisces? You can't. I mean, I can't. I don't know anybody who could do that. So what do we do? What do we do?
Go
We're
with
not
it.
controlled or manipulated. Yeah, we're not controlled or manipulated by these stars or energetic signatures. No, we must be in full control of our faculties. But I can assure you the energetic signatures are exactly what we're seeing in our societal structures and culture. And when you start to get specific with chart on chart, and you also look at progressions, it begins to paint a very clear picture. And I just want to say, I didn't want to believe this astrology. I did not. I set out on a mission to be like, this is hogwash, and I'm going to get to the bottom of it because my background is not in this at all. And in my pursuit, in ignorance, in egomaniac, headstrong, I have Jupiter in Aries in my natal chart. I went for it, often very headstrong Aries, and I didn't stop. And I discovered myself in the events that transpired in my life, in the events that were transpiring. And then I saw that I have an opportunity to be psychologically transformed through the information, one, and in studying it and seeing patterns and understanding myself deeper, and two, how to excel and move into what I really identified with but couldn't put into words. And as I studied the chart, it all began to come out to me like in 3D form. And I can remember many times weeping and being like, I can't believe this. Here it is. Like I would be studying an event or a conjunction or something, and then I'd go back to my chart and the same thing occurred. And I knew that there was something here. But I also know there can be a danger of throwing ourselves so high up there, being so Neptunian. I have Neptune on hugging my ascendant right there in retrograde, hugging my ascendant in Scorpio. And it's really hard sometimes to bring myself back down and live among people, so to speak. But our conscious energy, the sun, is the only place. The changes are made in the subconscious work, but then we carry it out into the conscious world. And this is why ideas become things. We must have a balance. We must have a balance, or all goes haywire. And it's when we do not have that balance that we see excess. And when we have excess, at times it's good. Like I have to use excessive violence maybe if someone's trying to harm me. So that's a good thing. Excessive adrenaline running through my body because I'm being triggered from unhealed wounds is not good. So there's a difference. All right. You ready to hop into the myth?
Yes, I am. Now we're going to talk about Chiron. This is a little general introduction from mythopedia.com. Wise Chiron, the son of Cronus and Philyria, was one of the centaurs, a powerful race of part man, part horse creatures. While the other centaurs were known for their violent and lecherous ways, Cronus was a gentle and helpful being. He was famously skilled in the arts of warfare, medicine, and music. Chiron was honored by both gods and mortals and trained some of the greatest heroes of Greek mythology, including Jason, Asclepius, and Achilles. Chiron himself was immortal, though he ultimately gave up his immortality and was transformed into a constellation. He was long revered in the ancient Greek world as a champion of the arts and was sometimes even worshipped as a patron god of physicians. And here is a classical source describing Chiron as the constellation Centaurus. Chiron is constellation Centaurus. He is said to be Chiron, son of Saturn and Philyria, who surpass not only the other centaurs, but also men in justice and is thought to have reared Asclepius and Achilles. By his conscientiousness and diligence, therefore, he won inclusion among the stars, and that is from Hyginus, the author. The book is Astronomic, Book 2 from the Myths of Hyginus, a well-known Roman author who lived between 64 BCE and 17 CE. Following is a passage from the author Apollonius of Rhodes, who was an ancient Greek author who lived during the 3rd century BCE, and this is from his book, The Argonautica, Book 2. At nightfall, they came to the island of Philyria, where Cronos, son of Uranus, what time in Olympus he reigned over the Titans, and Zeus was yet to be nurtured in a Cretan cave by the curettes of Ida, lay beside Philyria when he had deceived Rhea, and the goddess found them in the midst of their dalliance. And Kronos leapt up from the couch with a rush in the form of a steed with a flowing mane, but Ocean's daughter, Philyria, in shame left the spot and those haunts and came to the long Pelas Pelasgian ridges, whereby her union with the transfigured deity she brought forth huge Chiron, half like a horse, half like a god. So that's a little humorous. Chiron's half horse because his dad turned into a horse halfway in sex. Like that sounds like a dirty dad joke, honestly. Like,
So I did
well,
not see that anywhere.
yeah.
I have not come
So,
across that anywhere.
so because of that, because of being born during this circumstance, this passage is from Mythopedia. Philyria, ashamed of how her child has been conceived and disgusted at Chiron's animalistic appearance, soon after his birth, Chiron was abandoned and left to die by his mother. Luckily for him, he was found by Apollo, who chose to take the orphan in. Apollo taught the young centaur the art of the lyre, archery, medicine, and prophecy. Apollo then introduced Chiron to his sister, Artemis, the goddess of the hunt. Artemis taught him how to wield a bow and hunt with it. The fact that Chiron grew up to be so well balanced, peaceful, kind, and intelligent was attributed to the way he was raised by the two siblings. So, he was birthed by Saturn and a water nymph. Those are his parents, Saturn and a water nymph. And he was raised by the sun and the moon, conceived in deception and abandoned at birth. However, he did end up having a good childhood and a character that was very well written about because he was raised by the sun and the moon. Is there anything you'd want to
Okay.
add there?
Yeah, so I have um let me say this really quick. Let's just say really fast that Chiron was discovered in 1977 by Charles Cowell. And Chiron has traveled extensively around the solar system. So Chiron takes 50 years, roughly, to have a return. And so we now have seen, because it's in Aries, we now have seen Chiron go all the way through 12 signs, which is interesting to note. But it is a 120-mile long object, asteroid 2060. Interesting, the eighth house, reduces to an eighth, and we deal with themes of the eighth house very heavily, and it trines to the fourth. But when it nears the sun, it shines and looks like a comet. So they also gave it a comet number. And the Kuiper belt is where the orbit lay. So he's among the trans-Neptunian objects called centaurs. So he's not the only one up there, but his orbit is highly eccentric between Saturn and Uranus. And I say that because Saturn does play heavily into this story. And I have that Chiron's mother is one of the 3,000 water nymphs named Philyra, an oceanid or sea nymph. His father is Titan Cronus, better known as Saturn. The story goes that Philyra had a humanoid form and was very beautiful. And walking one day, Saturn saw her, became overcome with lust, and he wanted her. He began to pursue her. She wanted nothing to do with him. She would run away from him, and she ran and turned herself into a mare. So now we've got an extreme here where she was willing to change her form to get away from Saturn. But Saturn turned into a stallion, and he overtook her and he raped her. Once Chiron was born, Philyra looked upon him and said, "Get this monster away from me." She was so distraught over this birth of, Chiron being half man, half horse, being a centaur, that she begged and pleaded with Jupiter to turn her into a tree, which he did. And he turned her into a linden tree. That's how I have how he was born. I had never come across your interpretation, but it's there. A lot of it is the same. And we see different stories of Chiron for sure.
Yeah, the Argonautica is actually one of the oldest Greek stories that we have that were written down, like the oldest written version of a Greek story from around 300 BCE. Yeah, and there's many different versions, especially of Greek and Roman mythology, many different versions of them over time. So it's just interesting to see how they evolve with the times and who the authors were.
So he was found wandering. He was found by, wandering shepherds who, like your story, brought him to the sun god Apollo, who adopted him. That's when I didn't know about Artemis. Didn't hear anything about that, but it makes sense that others were there and would help him and teach him. So we learned music, archery, philosophy, the arts, herbal and medicinal healing. Was considered to be a brilliant thinker. You brought that in, known for creating the arts of astrology and deep healing. And when he was grown, he made his home at Mount Pelion in a cave where he earned a living tutoring the aristocratic children. He taught all he knew to them. So there's this fondness to children too that comes up with him that leads us to Apollo, who was called the eternal child. And so reminds me of that card where the child is it the sun card, yeah. Yeah, the sun god Apollo representing the sun card. And there's a child on a white horse, yeah. So it kind of like all ties into this eternal child thing going on there. Half man, half horse, he was immortal. Yep. So I have that he was immortal, and you want to pick up the story, or was that all that you have on that?
No, I just have a little bit on his relation to Dionysus. There's this one quote from the Bibliotheca by it was called the 10,000 Books, a 9th century work of Byzantine patriarch of Constantinople Photius. And it says Dionysus was loved by Chiron, from whom he learned chants and dances, the Bacchic rites and initiations. And this is an interesting connection because Chiron was said to be the most civil of centaurs, right? While Dionysus and his rites are wild and uncivil, right? About getting in touch with the animal self, very ecstatic. Dionysus was the god of wine, but wine in ancient Greece was always a concoction of different plants, adding various psychoactive drugs. Dionysus played a central role in the Eleusinian mysteries, where later they've examined some pottery, and it is likely that they were using um, ergot, which has LSA in it, very similar to LSD. So Dionysus played a critical role in the myths and rituals going on there. So it seems like you can follow that lineage of the death and rebirth rituals, psychedelic healing, all the way back to Chiron in this regard. So I thought that was an interesting relation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, and it also shows that the after effects reported by the Eleusinian initiates of having hope and love for mankind and losing their fear of death, and the fact that only respected members of society were allowed to partake in the Eleusinian rituals, it makes it a little more clear how Dionysus' wild and uncivil rites and initiations could have come from the most civil, gentle, helpful, wise, respected Chiron. It teaches a lesson of indulging your wild side once in a while to maintain greater civility in everyday life.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, he was half man, half horse. So he, I talk about that a little later, but he did have interactions in the real world. And how well do you think he was accepted there? He was accepted among humans
Oh,
socially. Okay, well, he was half man, half horse, and he was immortal. And so let's go on to where he is wounded and how he gets this wounded healer archetype name. So he lived many, many centuries. In fact, he lived 900 years, resulting in him teaching for centuries and to many students. One of them was Hercules, whom Chiron trained to kill a Gorgon. And the most famous being, of course, Medusa. And due to Chiron's guidance and knowledge, Hercules killed a Gorgon and drained her blood. And he brushed the tip of his arrows in that blood. And a Gorgon's blood is said to be of the highest toxicity. Therefore, anyone struck by these arrows would be wounded in the most extreme ways and never able to heal from it. So Chiron would suffer with this wound that he's about to get for 900 years. So the story goes on that he was hanging out with Hercules and a group of centaurs who are the rowdy bunch, as you know. And this is what's interesting is the centaurs were known for being rowdy and disruptive and parties and rebel rousers and drunkenness. He had that instinctual nature below, but he was not like them. He was not accepted by them because he wasn't like them. He was very different.
hmm.
He had his instinctual nature under the intellect, had it under control, basically, or he was suppressing it. And we'll go into that in a minute. But he was struck inadvertently by one of Hercules' arrows meant for a centaur, and it hit his thigh. It hit the animal part of him. Hobbled off, went to his cave, and incidentally, Chiron was married to Charlico, and she was a healer, and she did all she could to heal him, but to no avail. All she could do was keep redressing that wound. So perhaps I wrote all she could do was try to redress the wounds and comfort him, perhaps in the deepest way possible, by her very presence, for support, and by holding space for his pain. She did not recoil, run away, abandon, or leave him. She did not stop when he shrieked out and complained, and I imagine was angry and frustrated over this insidious pain that he could not heal. She stayed with him until the very end. And in Dmitri George's book of Asteroid Goddesses, The Psychology and Astrology of the Re-Emerging Feminine, under chapter 12, the minor asteroids, the knowledge holders, Urania and Chiron, page 197, 198, I quote. Actually, this is 199. I'm going to skip because we shared some of this already, but she says, Astrologically, Chiron is a knowledge holder who transmits higher teachings either as an outer teacher, Saturn, or as an inner teacher or spirit guide, Uranus. Embodying the archetype of wounded healer, Chiron stresses the importance of going within to find a cure or answer, and then sharing it with others. Notice, or we're going to notice how he ends up being victorious here in a minute, but he has to figure this out. The help is not coming from the outside initially. In his two primary subjects of education and medicine, Chiron unites the body and mind, instinct and intellect. We see his ancient teachings now emerging through the recent advent of holistic health and education. In chart analysis, a prominent Chiron indicates the potential to be an educator or healer, one who changes established limited views. So we've got Chiron finally saying something has to change. And he decides, comes up with a plan to go to Jupiter, Zeus, and says, hey, can I just die? Can I just die? If I die a mortal death, then I'm done and I'll be out of this pain. But because I'm immortal, I can't die. So you've got this intellectual human nature sitting atop pure animal or instinct in constant pain. So there wasn't really anyone else like him on Earth the way that he was. And
Yep.
I think
Yep.
that he suffered for this quite a bit.
Yeah, there's a lot to take in here with this version of his death. I have a different version, but first another detail that appears in some variations of the version you just mentioned. The poison that was on the arrow was poison that Chiron himself had made and given to Hercules, and it ended up on him. And also, this whole situation, to me, it really made clear why Chiron is sometimes referred to as the masculine wound, because he is the master healer, right? That is his profession, right? To a man, like, how good you are at your profession, that's a big part of like your identity, your ego. Especially you live for 900 years, this is the main thing you do all the time. Like, how good you are at your profession, like, especially men hold a lot of self-worth in that. And he could not heal himself, the master healer. And it also goes to show that men also have this tendency to want to be an island all unto themselves. Even though he did have many friends around him, it still shows the lesson that you can't do it all on your own. Sometimes there's a challenge so great, it doesn't matter how great of a master you are or how hard you try. The wave is too big. There's nothing you can do about it. And also, I think this scenario shows a lot about the importance of consent, right? If you think about how this ended, through Chiron's willing consent, he was able to die. An immortal was able to die. That means through the power of willing consent, even the immortals can die. And this topic comes up a lot in magic, spell work, the supernatural, right? In things such as banishing rituals, even predictive programming, right? The power of willing consent is so powerful. And I thought that was uh, a big lesson from this version of the myth. Do you have anything you wanted to add before I get to the other version of his death from Ovid?
Yeah, I want to finish. He seeks Jupiter out, right? Begging him,
I thought you
asking
did.
him. Uh, yep, but then I didn't finish.
Oh,
So this is where Prometheus enters the picture. And if you remember Prometheus, while Jupiter was asleep, Prometheus sneaks up to Mount Olympus, steals the fire, and gives it to the masses. So the story goes. So he condemned Prometheus to be changed chained to a rock forever, and have a griffin pick out his liver each day, only for it to grow back and heal at night, to have the griffin peck it out again the next day. So the only way out for Prometheus ever would be if someone exchanged places or he died, but he could not die. So Chiron begged to switch places with him, and Jupiter allowed it. So Prometheus, the god of light, heat, and fire, was released. Lost, and he finally resolved his wound. And Jupiter was so moved, and he saw Chiron's courage, and he honored him by raising him in the night sky as the constellation Centaurus or Sagittarius. And that's how the story ends. But there's a lot to say about all that. But yeah.
yeah.
So
There's a lot there if you really just sit and absorb it and think about what everything really means.
absolutely. I've got some key points, but go ahead and share more of the myth that you have, because I'm kind of done. And let me say this: you said, "Hey, where are you gathering all this?" One of the things that I'm going to point out, and I've got written down here, is to credit Cosmic Arts Astrological Services YouTube channel. There's a lady named Joy there who does a whole series in an episodes on Chiron. And some of the information I gathered from her, and I actually quote her directly here later. And I want to look at Chiron's symbol too. But yeah, I did get some of the story from her, confirmed, I should say, the story, and tightened it up. So she's an incredible teacher. But this is the story. I haven't read anything deeper, but I got to say, I find it really interesting. The 300 BC Greek book that you mentioned, I have never heard of it, and it's way older, right? But
Yes.
then again, that was oratory. You said it was written down
No,
by
no, this version was
an
actually written.
amanuensis, or
This version was actually written down in 300 BC. That is actually the oldest written version of the
okay,
Greek story that we have.
that's crazy. Yeah, that's really
Yes.
cool.
And this next one is
Hey,
from, well, this next version is from Ovid, who was a Roman poet who lived between 43 BCE and 17 CE. And this is interesting, to say the least. So, this is, let me see if I can find the book. The book is Fasti, Ovid's Fasti. So, begins. Alcides had come after accomplishing a part of his labors, and little but the last orders remained for the hero to obey. You might see standing by chance together the two masters of the fate of Troy. On the one side, the boyish descendant of Aeacus, and on the other, the son of Jupiter. The Phalarian hero received Hercules hospitably and asked the reason of his coming, and they're talking about Chiron now, and Hercules informed him. Meantime, Chiron looked askance at the club and lion's skin and said, "Man worthy of those arms, and arms worthy the man." Nor could Achilles keep his hands. Nor could Achilles keep his hands from daring to touch the skin all shaggy with bristles, and while the old man fingered the shafts clotted with poison, one of the arrows fell out of the quiver and stuck in his left foot. Chiron groaned and drew the steel from his body, and Alcides groaned, and so did the Haemonian boy. The centaur himself, however, compounded herbs gathered on the Pegasean hills and assuaged the wounds by bootless remedies. But the gnawing poison defied all remedies, and the bane soaked into the bones and the whole body. The blood of the Lernaean Hydra mingled with the centaur's blood, left no time for rescue. Achilles, bathed in tears, stood before him as a father. So would he have wept for Peleus at the point of death. Often he fondled the feeble hand with his own loving hands. The teacher reaped the reward of the character he had molded. Often Achilles kissed him, and often said to him as he lay there, "Live, I pray thee, and do not forsake me, dear father." The ninth day was come when thou, most righteous Chiron, didst grid thy body with twice 7 stars. So wow, that's an interesting scene there.
Yeah,
A bunch of
yeah,
guys
for
hanging
sure.
out, getting all little gay together, and then, oops, the poison arrow fell from my fingering, and Chiron is in the worst pain that totally ends him. Which, again, this is more masculine wound. Like, there's nothing that really undercuts a man's ego like doing some random dumb shit that we're all vulnerable to, but men have this need to feel super capable at all times because their value is based upon what they can do. And oh, if you make some stupid mistake like that, it's like you're not worth anything. The master healer was taken down by a dumb accident. And also, they said, "Didst grid thy body with twice 7 stars." This is what is cited on this passage is what is cited on the Mythopedia for the claim that Chiron was turned into Sagittarius by the gods, although Sagittarius today has 17 named stars, 69 total stars. I couldn't find any source mentioning Sagittarius with 14 stars, just to be super accurate. Do you have anything to add before I continue? There's a little bit more.
No, I'll just double back. Go ahead.
Now, the way this is written, it's about they're about to mention the centaur, meaning Chiron, but as you'll see, it's questionable when they stop talking about Chiron. So here is continuing from
Well, yeah, let me
Fasti.
let me say this one thing about Sagittarius,
Yeah.
okay? This is Jupiter, ninth house, mutable fire, and the theme is direct your lower nature with higher aspirations. That's from a book I'm going to quote from Your Body and the Stars, the Zodiac and Your Wellness Guide, Stephanie Morongo, MD, RYT, and Rebecca Gordon. It seems there is this need of balance between what is instinctual, which you don't control, and I'm going to go into this. He had no control over that, and then taking this rational, conscious intellect and moving to a place of acceptance.
Everything you just mentioned also describes Chiron, so I can see why people would ascribe Sagittarius to Chiron. Now, I'm about to continue from Fasti by Ovid. They're about to mention the centaur, meaning Chiron, but it's unclear when they're not talking about Chiron anymore, the way it's written and formatted in the book. So I'll let you decide. So there's another New paragraph, new line, Roman numeral 3 NON 5th. I'm assuming this is a date. And under that line, there's one line that says, the curved lyre would wish to follow the centaur, but the road is not yet clear. The third night will be the proper time. Now, two lines down, separate paragraph, PR.NON.6. It appears to be another date. And directly underneath that same paragraph, it says, the scorpion will be visible from its middle in the sky when we say that tomorrow the knowns will dawn. Which I thought that it was strange, and it continues more. So the next line continues, when from that day the evening star shall thrice have shown his beauteous face, and thrice the vanquished stars shall have retreated before Phobos, there will be celebrated in olden rite the nocturnal Lemuria. And once you read that, if you know about the ideas of the lost continent of Lemuria, it's like, whoa, are they talking about the same thing here? This is strange and interesting, but it seems to not be related. It goes on to describe the celebration and the origin of a Roman holiday called Lemuria, the Ovid Fasti book. It continues to describe the Roman holiday called Lemuria, where they gave their offerings to their ancestors and cleansed their house of malevolent energies. And he also goes on to explain how the Roman Lemuria was originally called Raymoria with an R to honor Remus of the Roman origin story, and over time evolved into Lemuria because, quote, in course of the ages, the rough letter which stood at the beginning of the name was changed into the smooth, and soon the souls of the silent multitude were also called Lamors. That is the meaning of the word, that is the force of the expression. While the name Lemuria of the Lost Continent theory came from the English zoologist when he Philip L. Slater, when he noted the lemurs in India and Madagascar were very similar. So he hypothesized that there could have been at one time a land bridge between India and Africa, and this theory was supported by similar sediment layers as long as local myths. But it seems like the two words are not related in any way. I thought that was an interesting side note.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought you'd appreciate that little star riddle. If you wanted, I'm sure you could track down all those definitions and all those dates and figure out what the hell they were talking about.
Yeah, that's deep stuff. I mean, I've never ever heard any of that. So it's interesting. But when you said Lamora, is that how you say it?
Lemuria.
Lemuria?
Yeah.
Lemuria.
Yep.
Something in me rose up. Like I've heard this before. What is
Yep.
that? I've studied this before. Like
Basically in Atlantis in Indonesia.
Okay. Yeah, okay. The Lemurians, right?
Yeah.
Lemirians or something.
Yes.
They look like elves.
I don't
Dude,
remember
what
that
if
part of it.
that's really
I remember
real?
the sunken
Not to go
continent.
too far left here.
It's seriously, it's possible because
Seriously, if
it's
we're hybrid,
supported. I mean, it was supported by similar sediment layers, similar wildlife, and there's also
I know, I
local
know.
myth where the indigenous tribe talk about that there used to be a continent, but now there's ocean there. So I mean, there's
I'm
multiple
telling
things
you,
pointing in that
it
direction.
is. There's been so much discovery. It's just coming so fast and furious right now with Pluto and Aquarius. There's no doubt about it. All kinds of information is going to be channeled down
You
and
know,
just new
yeah,
discoveries and
it seems
everything
so
that we
crazy.
thought was true is going to be exposed.
Yeah,
Like
it seems
this is what's happening.
it just seems crazy that it took someone
It's
this long to say, wait a minute. You're saying the Egyptians moved 10-ton blocks and they didn't even have the wheel yet? That doesn't make sense.
Well,
Like, what are these
I now
drills you're talking
understand
about?
we
We
were
got like these
highly
hand drills
advanced.
and hand tools. We haven't found those either. And then wait a minute,
We were
Gobekli
highly
Tepe, go back.
advanced.
Then we found Gobekli Tepe, and they were literally forming the bedrock. And this is before agriculture was invented, supposedly, and that was discovered in the 90s. It took someone like it's taking people this long to seriously question the fact that we have this site where people were carving bedrock supposedly before agriculture was invented. Obviously, that doesn't make any sense.
There's a ton of that, and that's what's being unearthed, so to speak. And true knowledge is being poured out on the earth. Water. And we, listen to our water episode for the significance of water, of all the elements. Without water, there's no life. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. I want to get into the astrology here. Are you ready to rock and roll with that? Okay. Well, anything else on the myth that we want to? I don't think I have anything else more. As I go into the astrology, I go back to the myth. I reference it quite a bit.
Well, that's everything I had, and I hope that after laying out this mythology, people will be able to better understand why the asteroid Chiron has the effect that it does.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. I learned a ton that I didn't know. Well, again, I want to credit Joy from Cosmic Arts Astrological Services for some of the information that I've gathered this evening. I'm quoting her directly here. She speaks of Chiron and she says, Chiron acts as a bridge between the inner and outer solar systems. So again, we see the symbology of the intellect and the instinctual, the knowing and the unknown. And she draws this conclusion because the orbit of Chiron is between Saturn and Uranus. I said this, and it is highly eccentric. So that's important to understand this. It doesn't go around, in this even type of orbit. She says to truly appreciate this rationale, one must have a firm grasp on how the planets go about the wheel. So look to Saturn, our episode, look to Uranus, our episode, and listen to them as we break down those two planets for more of an in-depth and closer view of these archetypes. And due to this unusual orbit, again, he doesn't spend the same amount of time in each of the zodiac houses. So in Libra, he remains 1.5 years. He zips right through there. But when we do Aries, he's in there for 9 years. And this is the longest transit, and it's the one that we are currently in. And so when we look at Aries, which we're going to dive into here in a moment, this is themes of self-worth, value, as Aries rules the first house of the zodiac wheel, or what is known as the ascendant. I want to talk a moment about Chiron's symbol. And if you look for it in the chart in the sky, it is a K on top of an O, standing for object cowl. And it looks like a key with 2 teeth in it, one for Saturn and one for Uranus. And it is said to be the key to healing and unlocking and unleashing the freedom of higher consciousness. We see the centaur tied to Sagittarius, tied to direct your lower nature to higher aspirations. Where is the 9th house? It is the house of God. We talk about the 9th house a little. So the key to healing is, again, unlocking that higher consciousness and unchaining that sun's vitality. And it's interesting to see if I can find this. I thought it was right here. And that's all I have on the symbol. But we have to remember here, what is it a key to? We go back to the myth to find out what it's a key to. And it's to the wound that is long lasting, 900 years. No matter what intellect you use, all of your knowledge, all of your smarts, you just can't heal this thing. It's insatiable. It won't stop. I have, it is a wound that was not made by you. This is very important to understand. And I'm going to now share in my studies of it kind of my own understanding. So weigh it. I hope you weigh everything we say and test it and check it and chew that meat and spit out the bones. We're not for everybody, But I tell you, I'm beginning to understand that vibration is very important when it comes to Chiron and understanding that, again, not caused by you, but the vibration even within your mother's belly. And as you were one in exchange of energy, food, nurturance, everything, life itself, through that umbilical cord. And what was inherited there is an area of focus of study for me in relation to neurodevelopment and disorders that we're seeing just in mass and within our mental wellness areas of society. And it's really, really sad. But the astrology and the natal wheel, let's hit it. So within the zodiac wheel, we have what's called the actors, who are the planets, the signs, who are the costumes they wear, and the houses. And the houses are the stage areas, the place where our lives and events are going to unfold. There are more important spots in the chart. To truly understand astrology, you have to learn these layers and learn these meanings, because all astrology is layer upon layer upon layer telling a story. And depending on how those layers are, different stories can be told. But there are main angle houses. And these are the 4 houses of 1, 4, 7, and 10. And these cusps are extremely important to look at. They play a huge role when interpreting the chart. We always must remember the entire chart. We can never isolate. It's very important to say. But there are more prominent spots, more better situated spots, houses that show fortune, houses that could show enemies. There's a whole ebb and flow. There's a day part of the chart and a nighttime part of the chart. There are 4 quadrants in the chart representing 4 different areas. So understanding where your Chiron is the unfolding of layers of a story that is uniquely you, because no 2 charts are ever duplicated. You can see how the chironic wombs appear, and you can interpret them, and you can also see the helpers and the remedies that are at play in every single natal chart to help you work through the wounds from birth. And I say from birth because these wounds showed up initially when he was conceived. He was conceived through horrible circumstances of a god taking a nymph and making it his force. So Satyrian, isn't it? So hardcore, so
Either
cruel,
that
so
or the other
mean.
version of cheating on his wife.
Right,
And then she barges in.
right,
Not a good circumstance either.
right. No, either way, wrong. So, themes. Rejection due to physical appearance as well. Yeah, those energetic, I should say, when the sperm met the egg, what condition was her energetic signature in? Was she happy?
Mm,
Was it received willingly?
yep. And
Was
that's
there
supported
angst
by
in her
science
energetic
now.
aura?
That's epigenetics.
Oh, yes, it is. Yes, it is. Epigenetics. Very good. Yes. And I go into that. It's important to understand that we now know this matters. So, conceived in that type of violence, not cool, and against her consent, and two different types of beings. Yeah, she was a sea nymph, and he was
Mm,
a main god,
yep.
not just any god, Cronus himself, Saturn, Father
Yep.
Time,
And also
and
just to
all
think
of the stories that
symbolically,
go with that.
like if you are the combination of your parents, symbolically you could think of Chiron is Saturn plus maybe the element of water, right? And that kind of does bear out.
It does. That's where we see him being a healer, and a lot of the water signs have that sensitivity to them and tend to be healers or
Right, but
in
he's
that
also
field.
disciplined. He was able to become a master at many trades, well respected among men. Very Saturnian, also a teacher.
Right. Yes. Very Capricornian, right?
Exactly.
And Aquarius. And Aquarius, as Saturn is the ancient ruler of Aquarius. Uranus came later. So we have, again, that whole embryonic experience, the neurodevelopment of the child. Then we have, once he's born, and who knows what that pregnancy was like and what that whole situation, what she spoke, what she said. Words matter, vibrations matter. They form things. They can form things to a solid form if frozen, and we know this. And go to our water episode where we dove into a lot on water and the experiments that they've done with water out there. I can't remember that guy's name, that Japanese dude. Emoto, is that his name? But anyway, go to our water episode, it's in there. Okay, so then we have the wound of just rejection of not only his entire body, I mean his physical appearance, because she called him a monster. I know that that's a myth and that could be embellishing, but she did not want this child. She was horrified that it was not just wholly one thing, but that there was this division that she was seeing. Reminded her of the whole situation of when she turned herself into the freaking mayor to begin with and why she did it. And, of course, the stallion is a powerful force. And all that stands for typically was inseminated with force inside of her.
And it also shows the
You're going to say
archetype
something?
of overcoming, a bad situation, being born into a bad situation, and he was able to become a well-respected master of many traits. Although he did have a good upbringing, like he wasn't raised by those parents, right? So I think that myth is also a statement on nature versus nurture, right? That he was
Yeah.
his epigenetics and the situation of his birth, you know, Saturn and water. It could have been gone very
Mhm.
badly. He was rejected, hated at birth, hated by even his own kind. But because he had a positive upbringing with Apollo and Artemis, that shows a lot about the myth making a statement on nature versus nurture.
Mhm. It's interesting the way that the wound occurs. You have the Achilles, I was thinking Achilles heel, back to that Achilles story, but that it is a wound that he could have avoided.
Right.
You understand that?
It's just a
If
silly mistake.
and Joy goes into this deeply, and I want to read what she says here in her series. And she talks about that the original wound results in self-rejection, and that rejection is of the deep instinctive self. And it's the part of us that flows, I'm paraphrasing here, with natural rhythms of life, Chiron's lower half. And so if we cut this off, we lose our ability to connect to all that is. Like, you need to feel the earth. Like, he overemphasized an intellect. And what did he do with his centurion self? We don't know. But it's not glorified or emphasized or elevated or written about or sung about in anything we can discover. Now, that's me adding that. You don't find that. You only
we do
find
have
his
the
upper
one link.
part.
We have the one link of his lower part with his relation to Dionysus that we mentioned, right? Because that was very much an exercise of the animal in a specific time and place.
True. One example.
Yeah, but the whole lesson from that
So
is
that
to exercise.
there might be more.
Well, as we mentioned, the whole point of that was to purposely exercise your animal self in only the right time and place so you can maintain a greater level of civility in your normal life. Like, you need to express that animalistic energy. You can't have it pent up, and through having a healthy means of expression, you can maintain that greater civility that Chiron was known for.
Well, yeah, but the centaurs were attacking them, and that's when he got wounded. And if you think about it, he didn't enjoy advocates for this. He didn't deal with his instinctive side to either run away or fight and win as a centaur. Like, she says, Joy states, it is where we cut off from our truest instincts, or where we can vacillate in discomfort from our lower instinctual impulses and our higher intellectual reasoning. So this is also about integration and wholeness, thus true acceptance of the self. So his wound occurred, something he could have avoided.
My interpretation of the version that I read, it seemed like he was more just caught in the crossfire. I think I left one part of that out where it says the two individuals, here we go, Chiron and Hercules, had supper, and Hercules asked for wine. Pholus opened a bottle of the sacred wine given to him by Dionysus, but attracted the smell of other centaurs from the nearby area. Centaurs attacked in an effort to take the wine, but Hercules killed many of them using poisoned arrows. One of those arrows hit Chiron by mistake. He was just caught in the crossfire. But yeah, there's many different versions with many different interpretations. That's an interesting question.
Why didn't he take off? Why didn't he use? He's not a fighter, although he's trained in it, and he trained Hercules to get a Gorgon. He himself is not a fighter.
Yep. Right. So, it's hard to know without more details, because something like that can happen so fast, and the fog of battle. It's hard to know exactly without more details. But there are many different versions. So it's either by mistake, or possibly, definitely being hit, I guess, in his leg is more of definitely shows a vulnerability on the animal side of things.
So Joy also is the last thing I want to bring in by her. She mentions regarding the symbolism of Prometheus and his involvement in this particular version and what he represents. We know that he was fire, light, therefore enlightenment when he was released. So there's a symbolism here of as the centaur's wound is healed, he's exchanging places with Prometheus. This unleashes life and vitality that's been chained, you see. And the deepest kind of vitality is equally set free. So Carl Jung says, the great Swiss psychiatrist, psychologist, teacher, said, nothing is ever healed, it is only released. We also see this with energy, as we know it cannot be destroyed, only transferred. So this is me here, return to a healthy sense. I think once you're on the other side and the enlightenment comes, it's a healthy sense of true acceptance of who you are, everything about your past, all of your ancestry, your story, your backstory. Maybe, some people might not identify this because you're like, I had a great childhood, but trust me, something's there somewhere, somehow with Chiron in your chart, in some way, shape, or form, that will help with the wound. And it's almost like a humbling that had to take place here with Chiron to be able to finally, like 900 years. Think about this, if it's true. But this version of the story is, so let's run with it. 900 years, man. I mean, where was everybody saying, let's figure this out? Why was he so alone? If he was like this mentor, but where were his friends? I find it really hard to believe, with all the gods and goddesses around, that he finally had to beg Jupiter.
Was there any mention of what happened over the 900 years, or just suffering?
Just suffering. And Charlico trying to heal him and trying everything. She was there for him, which, boy, that is so symbolic of how important it is to, I mean, think of what he was going through, and I alluded to this earlier, but, to hold space for people, and how mental health has really changed in recent years to where we're realizing the importance of feeling the pain and not masking it, and dealing with it, and having to find, I should say, a solution. Like, he was pushed to the, to this place of, I can't do this anymore. He was pushed to suicidal thoughts, and in essence, completely died. And so it's being willing for yourself to, this Chiron where the swoon is to be willing to find a solution, but knowing that it's gonna take outside help to have it get done. And
masculine wound.
Like I said,
that sucks for a man.
Yeah, exactly. And it's 900 years, man, and he didn't do that until.
And he's the master of healing, and
did.
he couldn't get it done in 900 years. Like, it's also a big blow to the masculine ego.
It's the wounded healer. That's where he gets this name. But when he finally does initiate, when he finally says, I will die. Now let's go to the Pluto episode. Let's go to shadow work, because now we're pulling in that entire theme of willing to go to the depths and individuate, willing to, quote unquote, symbolically die, to be reborn, to be transformed, to transmute, to be the phoenix rising from the ashes. So Chiron goes retrograde. And when he does in a chart, I was born with Chiron in retrograde in Pisces in the 4th house of home. A deeply painful spot to have him, and it mimicked my life. So we'll talk about that when we go into the charts in a minute, but the retrograde periods are significant because they often coincide with times related to healing, deep inner psychological work, or a self-discovery becomes more pronounced where you finally throw off these chains and transmute and allow yourself to not be defined by your father, your mother, by anyone. Remember, you're dealing with Uranus here, right?
That's a good lesson out of it too.
Saturn may be
That
there,
I haven't considered.
but you're dealing with Uranus. Yeah, the individuality and your uniqueness.
Not
and
being
that you
defined
hold
by the
value.
parents.
Right. Saturn was the 900 years. Uranus was Prometheus. You know, and the willingness to do what had to be done.
And also Prometheus, he brought fire to people, and fire has the ability to help people and harm people. And Chiron was a master of the medical arts, which also involves poison. You can, once you know medicine, you can help people or harm people with that. So I thought there's another parallel between them with that.
Yeah, that's true too. I have found when I looked at my chart and when I was doing consultations, I saw that when I talked about Chiron with people and brought out the Chiron story along with Pluto, along with Saturn, of course, we look at the whole chart now, all of the other planets too, in aspects, but you'll see when Chiron is prominent, and it often depicts the person and what they're struggling with. And it shows where they're holding, and I'm going to go into this in a minute here, trauma within the body, and how we now know, and I'm going to talk about Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, Kolk, in a moment, in his discovery of trauma, PTSD, and energetic vibration. It's really quite fascinating, but we know that trauma, even in utero, is transferred through what you mentioned, epigenetics, yes? So, for instance, if you have children that were born around a war zone or in the energetic field of a war zone, they tend to be more anxious and colicky babies and have problems with social adaptation. You see these patterns. That's just one of many. And you see deficiencies show up where there were deficiencies in that area, even in diet, and it can show up, some of these diseases, several generations down the road. And there's so much to that, man. There really is. There's so much to that. But we now know that trauma and correlating energy fingerprints are stored within the body. This comes from some of the work I'm doing. It's a thesis I'm going to be writing for my schooling on trying to ascertain whether in utero, beyond epigenetics, but where, how children are affected down the road in a mental health way, and how in this development diseases show up. And I'm going to read a few here. This is from the DSM manual. for psychological and psychiatric illnesses. I'm reading the Clinician's Guide to Diagnosis. And this is chapter 1, page 17. I do not own this material. DSM. Neurodevelopmental disorders. So this is disorders that occurred during the formative period while in the belly, while the development of the nervous system takes place. So neurodevelopmental. And if this goes rogue and this goes haywire, and we're understanding now just what stress alone does and how it changes a child, or is this child wanted? You know, what is the mental health of the mother like? What is she thinking about? What is she vibrating about? What is she exposing herself to? What is she listening to? What is she reading? All of these things manifest within the body. And there's another book here, The Body Remembers, I'm going to be going into, and how we now know that children are being impacted. But here's what can happen. You know, even when drugs and alcohol, of course, we know, of course, really impact, but we're now seeing higher rates of autism and intellectual disabilities. These are some of the neurodevelopmental disorders: borderline intellectual functioning, autism spectrum disorder, global development delay, unspecified intellectual disability, communication and learning disorders, language disorder, social pragmatic communication disorder, speech sound disorder, childhood onset fluency disorder, stuttering, selective mutism. Specific, we know trauma can silence and shut down the body, specifically the voice. Specific learning disorder, academic or educational problems, unspecified communication disorder, tic and motor disorders, attention deficit and disruptive behavior disorders. This includes ADHD, hyperactivity disorders, oppositional defiant disorder, disorders of eating, sleeping, and elimination, and other disorders or conditions that begin in the developmental time frame. Okay, so if we weren't having problems out there, we wouldn't have these disorders, and we can't blame them all on drugs. We can't blame them all on the heroin addicted mother, okay? That does result in part of it, but the en masse that we are seeing and have seen since the middle 90s is something that we need to sit up and figure out, and right quick. We have medicated a whole portion of generations within our society that have not been allowed to instinctively feel the pain. We've numbed ourselves, and we must understand discomfort is the body telling you something's wrong. Pain is your friend. Pain says something's wrong. When you trick the mind, you deceive through chemicals, and you pacify to soothe the root, you do not pull the roots, and you will never be well. We must do what Chiron did. We must go all the way to death with this. We must pull those roots up. And in order to do that, you must feel, you must look, and there's this whole adversity to allowing people to really experience the darkness. We get very uncomfortable. We don't know what to do with it, so we medicate, because little Johnny has to sit still in his chair.
Right.
Doesn't
And
matter. He's being beaten at home and that abused by his stepbrother. But little Johnny's got to sit straight. And because little Johnny can't talk about this, because trauma affects children differently than adults, he shuts down and acts out through the only emotional system he has set up at that age and expresses himself. It's a nightmare.
And also their
Went off on a
emotional
tangent.
system is being messed with since before birth. You know, babies are being born with microplastics in their blood that we know are hormone disruptors, right?
Yes.
The mother is drinking fluorinated
Yes.
water most likely and eating processed foods and all, and then when they're born, all the unnecessary medical treatments, the here, let's give your 12-hour-old baby this vaccine for hepatitis B, which you get from as an STD or intravenous drugs like that. It's insane, really. And the chemical trauma is from birth, before birth. It's crazy.
Chemical trauma. That is powerful. And you know what's really interesting is when you look at your parents' Pluto, very important to do when you're dealing with Chiron. Look at the generations here. The fourth house goes back, I believe, to great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents, and then the 12th house is deep, deep ancestry, going beyond the fourth. But when you look at your parents' Pluto, you see what the culture was like when, because Pluto stays for quite a while in a sign. Its orbit is elliptical as well, so it's eccentric, but it can stay in a sign for years and years and years and years and years. It's just like Aquarius is fixing to do in Pluto after it comes out of retrograde. But what happens here is you can see the cultural themes. So the cultural themes have a great impact on the way that you present yourself and act in society. And if you're not awakened to yourself and your true instinctive nature, you'll default to the culture. So if you default to the culture and you look at the culture of your parents and you look at how they parented, you're going to see this really ties heavily into fourth house. You got to look at the fourth house. No matter where Chiron is, you must look at the fourth house, because the fourth house is the home. And this is where, and also the ascendant, because you're birthed, the all-important ascendant, that's your portal in, man. So the first and the fourth are crucial to look at. But the parental heritage greatly figures in to your wounds. It has a strong tie and connection. So there's this argument that the biology of our human cells are made up mostly of water, therefore they can be impacted and altered by vibration and sound. So we know that water holds memory. Water holds memory. What are we made up mostly of? Water. What are our cells mostly made up of? Water. Now the water gets replenished and the water gets changed. This is so exciting. This is where all those beautiful mutable signs come into play. And what is Chiron? He's mutable. So you have this ability to cleanse yourself, find your solution by doing the things that need to be done to get where you need to go. Like instinctually, you do have these answers deep inside of you, but it will take another or an other or an outside situation to true, unless you are someone that goes really, spends time. This is where you'll find people have a very strong Chiron who are mystics and seers and philosophical people. They spend time with their pain. They spend time alone. They spend time figuring out who they are. And they're alone, but not lonely. And these people are truly fascinating. That's all I have to say about that. But Dr. Bessel van der Clark is a medical trauma doctor hailing from Hague, Netherlands, and was born July 3rd, 1943. I'll talk about him a minute. And he was born a Cancer sun. And he is a trauma specialist. And I find that so interesting because Chiron has to do with trauma. and trauma that occurred through your lineage, the parents' fourth house, and he was born a Cancer sun. So, that's pretty interesting, isn't it? So he...
Was that physical trauma or emotional trauma that he specialized in, that
Chiron
doctor?
he specializes in mental trauma from physical experiences, or, PTSD and wounds of a psychological nature. I'm going to read here his prologue from his book, The Body Keeps Score, Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma, 2014. He says this: as human beings, we belong to an extremely resilient species. Since time immemorial, we have rebounded from our relentless wars, countless disasters, both natural and man-made, and the violence and betrayal in our lives. But traumatic experiences do leave traces, whether on a large scale on our histories and cultures, or close to home on our families, with dark secrets being imperceptibly passed down through generations. They also leave traces on our minds and emotions, on our capacity for joy and intimacy, and even on our biology and immune systems. Trauma affects not only those who are directly exposed to it, but also those around them. Soldiers returning home from combat may frighten their families with their rages and emotional absence. The wives of men who suffer from PTSD tend to become depressed, and the children of depressed mothers are at risk of growing up insecure and anxious. Having been exposed to family violence as a child often makes it difficult to establish stable, trusting relationships as an adult. Most rape victims, combat soldiers, and children who have been molested become so upset when they think about what they experience that they try to push it out of their minds, trying to act as if nothing happened and move on. And this would be Chiron ignoring his instinctual self in some way. This would be Chiron being like, I know I'm a centaur, man. I know that I'm odd. Like, I'm half man, half horse. Like, this is crazy. Like, I don't belong in the human world and I don't belong in the centaur world because of my intelligence. I'm able to make it. But there's no doubt that he did deny his instinctual self until he couldn't anymore. And the wound was in his thigh, or in the Achilles heel. So it was in the lower part of his body. It was not in the upper man part of him. It takes tremendous energy to keep functioning while carrying the memory of terror and the shame of utter weakness and vulnerability. While we all want to move beyond trauma, the part of our brain that is devoted to ensuring our survival, deep below our rational brain, is not very good at denial. Long after a traumatic experience is over, it may be reactivated at the slightest hint of danger and mobilize disturbed brain circuits and secrete massive amounts of stress hormones. This precipitates unpleasant emotions, intense physical sensations, and impulsive and aggressive actions. These post-traumatic reactions feel incomprehensible and overwhelming. Feeling out of control, survivors of trauma often begin to fear that they are damaged to the core and beyond redemption. So, excellent book. I haven't finished it, but I found his work so far to be fascinating as he looks at how trauma is relived within the body. It remembers, and it's not just the brain. It remembers in other areas of the body, and he goes into this. So look him up. Look up that book. It was really, really enlightening for me.
I just in the state of society and the current trends, I just feel the need to mention after all that, like all that's 100% true, but also people have been a little too coddled, right? I've heard people say things like, I have PTSD because I was made fun of in high school. We're all made fun of in high school. I mean, come on, people, stop being ridiculous. Like there's
Yeah,
a very
so
intense
there's some
coddling of
self,
people.
yeah, there's some self deception going on there with the whole victim thing too.
Yeah, because
The
you get
victim mentality.
yeah, because there's social points to be gained. Oh, you're a victim. You're struggling. Look at you. You got all these burdens that you're dealing with. You know, pat on your back. You're doing such a great job just by existing. You don't need to develop any skills or learn things or become a remarkable person. You're already neurodivergent.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Well, in astrology, you've got Saturn and you've got Uranus impacting Chiron, and Saturn's going to bring those themes of limitations, especially in the family, because Saturn is the 10th house opposite of the 4th house and is said to rule the father. We find that wherever Saturn is in the natal chart in comparison to Chiron is important to take a look at for sure. And Uranus is that rebellious nature, inner individuality, uniqueness, intuitive, and creative parts of ourselves. And this is where we see Chiron as the curse breaker. And I just want to talk about this a minute. I thought about this today and how he basically was like, okay, I'm going to deal with this once and for all. You know, if this is the way I got to do it, this is the way I got to do it, but this will not pass. I will not allow this to be passed on. You see, he ended it. I don't think he had any children, from what I understand, but he stopped his father's violence. You know, he didn't create violence. He didn't abuse others. He, from the myth I have, he was the one to say, look, you know, it's basically like someone who has alcohol in their family or rage and excessive aggression and they abuse women, his father, right? He didn't let that pass. So it ties into Chiron tying into the 4th of home and family, and Cancer rules that house, and the moon is ruling over Cancer, and the moon represents our ancestry and the masses. And so it was, Chiron is, wherever that wound is a place to end ancestral trauma, ancestral ways of being and doing. It's the one in the family who's willing to be the rebel and break off that ancestral tradition, shift, and change the lineage forever. You know, I think it's really important. And this was something that I picked up that I didn't see when I studied him before, how much, no matter what you take from this, wherever Chiron is a wound that you did not do. This is nothing to do with you unless, and I want to bring this in and see what you think, or if you've seen this anywhere, it ties to our evolutionary story of, what took place before we were here. And somehow are these experiences precipitated by the astrological star map that will then initiate you into the very lessons needed through Chiron to clean up your karma, to clean up your family's karma. Because I could tell you that's what happened with my placement. One of the themes of my placement was to be that one that said, you know, I'm not going to be an alcoholic. I'm not going to abuse my children. I'm not going to beat my spouse. When I think back, I just got to tell you, I haven't talked publicly very much at all about what occurred to me ever to anyone except really, really close people. And even then, no one knows the details. And I don't want to bring any glory to it, but I cannot imagine what my nervous system must have went through, because I did not have a peaceful home. I did not have a peaceful mother nor father. They, you know, I'm not saying it was violent all the time and abusive every day, but I was born with so much water that my chart is 60% water, and I'm learning, you know, that's too much water. And I've since adjusted. But what I'm saying is, as an infant coming in under those energy footprints in so much water and so much, I know my birth was, I almost died. I was breech. It was horrible. It was a really bad experience. And it was just, everything was traumatic about my incarnation. Every fucking thing was traumatic. I was not born into peace. And you know, I'm a Scorpio ascendant, and they say if you were born as a Scorpio ascendant, it's the hardest ascendant to be, because your chart rules are Pluto and Mars, and that is not easy. That is not easy. So I can relate really, really to this archetype, and at least what it's doing in my chart. So I found out, you know, the nervous system of a child, incidentally, in my current studies, begins forming in the third week of development, the third week, and is developing it, you know, from that point on. When you think about just the profound impact that the mother's nervous system has on the forming of your nervous system, and you're just, like I said, connected with that umbilical cord, what a profound impact it must have on overall temperament and future abilities. Wow. Well, that all shows up in the chart too, you know, or hints of that energetic opportunity that, if not addressed, could transpire if the transits are right and all worlds collide. It's true.
Yeah.
This is, I study charts of psychopaths. I'm deep into psychology. I love to study it. I love to understand the mind, how it works, the way it works, from the biology to the unconscious areas and just everything about it. And so I'm starting to do a series on looking at psychopaths charts and getting in there and saying, you know, what does the chart speak and what was the life like? And other people do this too. So I'm certainly not the only one, but you can't deny it. If you know the language of astrology, then you will know how to interpret the chart. And Letitia Elizabeth Landon, who was a poet and novelist, also known as LEI, said, I will look on the stars and look on thee and read the page of thy destiny. I will look on the stars and look on thee and read the page of thy destiny. What opportunity lays there for
like
you,
everyone,
this incarnation in this lifetime?
just reflect on the fact that for thousands of years, no matter what part of the world you're from, your ancestors the people living in that land for thousands of years have known this about the stars. And we're so smart now, we think that's just a bunch of silly nonsense. Not us, but, modern scientific Western mindset. We know everything. We know better than our ancestors did for thousands and thousands of years. And we're just going to throw out all of the knowledge they accumulated that doesn't fit in with our new materialistic mindset. Like that obviously doesn't seem very wise.
Well, we know that we're having a revolution in this whole area of metaphysical healing, including astrology. So there's no stopping this. The generation I was born into, Uranus conjunct Pluto in Virgo, 1963. I was part of that conjunction that was separating, but it was still conjunct. These are wider planets. We use wider orbs. I'm grateful for the 7 degrees difference, though. Trust me, Pluto's intimidating. But I have it on the midheaven, Uranus, right there, 3 degrees conjunct Pallas, 3 degrees on my midheaven. So I very much can identify with wanting to bring in this water pitcher, like, I'll fill the water pitchers. I don't necessarily have to be the one standing there pouring it out, but I want this knowledge to go out one way, form, or another. And I'm doing it in my own way, which is, that's what a podcast is. You have total control of it, right? Or, partnership control. We do what we want to do, as long as we stay within the limits of the structure set forth by Saturn on this planet, then we're good. And what I'm saying is, but what you have is those Virgos that were born in that conjunction of Virgo, Uranus and Pluto conjunction. You have people that, like I said earlier, really want to expose and clean up areas of health, the medical field. And so I can really see in my chart how that conjunction and those energies, I've got Mars and Virgo as well in the same house. So all of that together in the 10th house is saying, you're going to, in a public way, talk about this. Because it's in the 10th house, the public house. Virgo will show up. Now it's progressing, and you must look at that, and you must look at the transits. I mean, the chart changes, nothing stays. But it definitely is my initial blueprint. And Pluto shows us a lot of karma, and it shows us our soul evolutionary journey and what we need to go through in the deeper, longer lessons, a lot like Chiron. That's why they work together, and Saturn, in the areas where we'll grow the most and utterly transform, by the way, completely become changed in something. So I want to move on really quickly here to what Chiron's doing now and what it's been doing. And Chiron, as we went into the night chart, moved into the Aries. It did this in 2018 and is going to finally leave in June 2026, when it's going to make its ingress into Taurus. So we're going to be in this Chiron Aries energy until 2026. So Chiron is not done yet in Aries. And let's see what happens with all the exposure by 2026. I think pretty much all of the stories are going to be out there in a really, really huge way, because of what Aries has to deal with here, and what Aries represents. And to make sense of this current transit, we got to break it down in layers. So add here any ideas that you have as I shoot some of this out. But the symbol is Aries. Here's where we have the ram's horns. Here's where we have the animal, the ram. And I don't know how much you know about the ram. Have you seen the ram? He's one tough son of a gun.
In a literal ram?
That dude, a literal mountain goat.
I've seen
ram.
one or two on
Yes,
the farms
sir.
out here.
Okay, go look that up on YouTube and watch some videos, man.
They
Okay,
like
they are fierce.
to run into each other.
Yes, they do, and they participate in what I call horn banging.
Yep.
Powerful forces to try to overcome this enemy and strut their stuff and put themselves up first in front of the females. It's this impulsivity, cardinal fire, that is common with Aries. Impulsivity. If you're born with Chiron and Aries, ouch, not an easy Chiron. Just saying, Diddy has impulsivity. Powerful forces here are at play in the Aries energy. This is the great warriors of the zodiac, ruled by Mars. And listen to our Mars episode to get a more deeper understanding of Mars. This is cardinal expression. This is masculine expression. So cardinal is moving out and initiatory, starting, beginning, putting something out there in a big way. The fire element, you want to talk about fire a little bit? You know a little bit more about fire than I do. But what can you share about the fire element?
Fire is the masculine element. It's very outgoing, right? It's very aggressive, assertive, traditional masculine values, activity, not passivity, right? Also symbolized by the rod, the obelisk.
Right. We find fire esoterically to be the inspirational part of us, the creative part of us
Sometimes
that,
associated with spirit.
yes. And fire element also has highly to do with romance, love,
Sure,
sex.
passion,
This is
right?
where yes, pardon me, passion. This is where Aries connected to Mars gets the impulsiveness with not to be an impulsive sign sexually as well, active, ambitious, assertive, competitive energy. Aries is the I am of the I am of the zodiac. So this is an extroverted energy, a free energy, highly individualistic, also because he rules the first house. And the ascendant is crucial to understand here. So there's a self-assurance that comes with Aries being the I am, the initiatory, powerful, the most powerful fire that we have, pulsating, impatient, can be prideful, can be headstrong, the ram. Aries signifies the head, the part of the body. I'm going to go into that in a minute. So headstrong. And where we see the temper, the quick temper of Aries, and tying the layer of Mars, we see of one thing, courage. Where Mars is where your energy, courage, stamina, or not, depending on its condition and aspects, where we will take our life vitality and be able to put it out. It's our desire nature. This is why when you see charts like Epstein, Mars conjunct Venus, you see misuse of Mars energy, and not always. It's not always a misuse, but you can see it with his other aspects and things going on. This misuse of the Venus, the maiden. The moon is the mother, and Venus is the maiden. And we see him having abused many young women. So Mars also is about survival. This is important. This is why Aries is the soldier and has this thrust for the oppressed and wants to war for them and go to bat for them, and feels like in some psychological way that they're saving another person. So we see this dominance with Diddy with his Chiron, in how his going out after these people, especially women, and this dominating, if it's all true, we see how that dominance went rogue, and his Mars went rogue, and his sexuality, according to the allegations, went rogue. So
And
wherever we see Mars in a chart, go ahead.
well, it's also very much about respect, right? You have to remember Mars is the masculine soldier, and as you mentioned, he wants to fight for the people in the most actually the most balanced version of Mars. And as we see, the less balanced version of Mars come out in the aggression of your everyday average man, so commonly it is triggered by a disrespect. Like whenever you see a silly video of like a fight breaking out in a line at McDonald's and people are like, "Oh, he really got into a fight over some French fries." No, he didn't get into a fight over French fries. He got into a fight over respect.
Ah, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I just wanted to add that little point because
Yeah,
that is the just thinking about Mars from that angle.
right. I want to read about the first house a minute here out of Chris Brennan's book on Hellenistic astrology and the importance of Aries in the first house. Before I read that, I have Aries, March 21st to April 19th, the time the seasons change. All the four cardinal houses, pardon me, four angled houses show a change in seasons. House one is the emergence of spring. I call this the cosmic erection of Earth. It is the time frame of 4 a.m. to 6 a.m., the emergence of the sun for a new day. So the number one, the first house or first part of the day. One is the seed in the tarot, the initiatory energy needed to then build a life. So Aries is the self pride and the ego at its rawest, purest forms. It is where you emerged, like spring emerges new every spring. We have the whole world turned green again. It's the incarnated spirit in bodily human form, a potent, powerful time of the wheel when all things begin again. Thus we get hope springs eternal. This deals with themes, the first house, where we're born, where we come in, the actual physical body, themes of identity, image, and the self. So that's what Aries and Chiron has been dealing with since 2018. It's been dealing with how the self interacts with itself and others in all sectors of society. And I didn't break this down because we're sitting at 2.5 hours and I knew this was going to be long. But let me tell you, go look at what Chiron's been doing in 2018 and follow Aries, like find a video that goes through all the themes, and you'll see that is exactly what's been happening within our culture. We've got this shift of I'm not going to take it anymore. I'm not going to be abused anymore. I will just drop those relationships that are not healthy. The I is rising in a way of shadow work. and, Chiron themes where the wounds are. And the eye is now able in Chiron to move about and to shift and to grow and to change. The sun is our conscious energy, okay? It's what we're growing into while we're here. The growth lessons of that sign. It's the car brand like Ford, okay? But the ascendant shows and reveals the car model, the first house, the interior, and how it's going to maneuver that sun, that soul energy on the roads of life, on the stages that it will take place within the houses as it goes around the wheel, fulfilling the sun sign, supporting the sun sign through trial and hardship to full manifestation, which is what happens down on earth, because all spiritual teachers and anyone who's talked about earth in most antiquities, at some form or another, there's this theme of it being hard here. There's this theme of it being difficult here. And so the sun is growing into the sun sign, and the ascendant shows how it goes about, and its giftings and its disabilities as well show up in the first house. Any aspect, sextile, trine, or square, or opposition to the first house is imperative to understand when dealing with your wounds with Aries and Chiron. So I'd like to take a look here for a moment and closing it down at a chart. I would like to just talk about Peter Dinklage, and he was the actor from Game of Thrones. And he was born, obviously, and I don't know the proper term, so I just want to tell you I am really trying to be sensitive here. I deeply respect this man and his work and have looked into his life very deeply. And what an incredible human being. But he was born a dwarfism, and he has an Aries Chiron, an Aries ascendant, Chiron in the first house. In the first house. Now he has a very visible physical wound that we can see through the disability, I guess it would be called, of dwarfism. And what I find extremely interesting in his chart is his first house has Chiron as an Aries ascendant, which means Mars will rule his chart, and he is one fierce dude, especially in Game of Thrones. You see his Mars in that powerful frame come forth that demands respect in that character. And you could see him drawing on his own fights and challenges that he's had to do. And it's interesting, the writers actually put some of that in there where he was completely persecuted and how he handled it. But he talks about that. And his Chiron is opposite Uranus, Jupiter, and Pluto. Uranus, Jupiter, and Pluto. Not going to break that down, but that's powerful to say. Pluto plays a part. These opposing forces, this other, opposites are another person. This tied to Pluto goes back to deep soul evolution and ancestry. This was inherited from some gene, some genetic malfunction that caused him for his body to be born the way it was. Jupiter is, remember, the benefic, the largest planet in our solar system. How ironic that it's opposite the largest planet And he was born in the 7th house, and he was born in the 1st house with Chiron as a dwarf. I mean, the challenge is right there. It's very, very clear. And Uranus, I can't really speak to the events, but perhaps him being born that way was a shock. Perhaps it was skipped generations. I don't know the whole story behind that, but there's something more deeper to be said of that. So he was a Gemini sun, and he is an actor, and it's in the 3rd house, so it's home. So he is able to use Mercury there and speak, and it's in his Mercury is in Taurus, near the cusp of the 3rd house of Gemini, showing that his Mercury would have themes having to do with money and themes having to do with bringing in his security through him using communication. And it's very, very obvious. You've got Venus in the 1st house as well in Aries, showing his love of doing that, I would say, because it's in the physical body. I would believe he greatly enjoys loving acting. I would also say he probably makes good money at it, with Venus being in Aries. So that's just one way that it shows up in a person's chart, and that was just quite vivid. And any comments on that?
Wow, no, it fits perfectly.
Yeah, isn't that something? So are you aware of where your Chiron is? Have you looked at this?
I've looked at it before, but not recently. I do not recall.
Okay. So you said I could share some. I'm not going to get too detailed as the chart's personal. Some people don't want their chart shared, but you said it was okay. So you were born a Libra sun, 12 degrees in the 4th house, conjunct Chiron in the 4th house.
It was conjunct.
You were born, it was 7 degrees away, and that's close enough for me to call that a conjunction. It's in the same sign, it's in the same house. And it would have, it's on its way actually to move through your sun. You would have, well, also, let's just go back to this. You are a Cancer ascendant, so the moon plays very heavily in your chart, and having it squaring your Chiron, ouch. The moon is ruling the 4th house, right? But it's not home. It's in the 1st house in Cancer, in the Aries home that we just talked about. And that energy there, Cancer and Aries, it's not complementary to that house. It's an uncomfortable energy. It's also squaring the home. So the moon herself is in an awkward, stressful condition, first in its domicile, and secondly, over there back to the 4th, indicating to me that with Mercury, let's just say this too, this is using Placedius, you've got Mercury in Virgo and your part of fortune in Virgo, where you're going to be able to glean very deep, significant treasures from that information in your life to help you. And Libra is next to it then. It's sharing the same house. You have Virgo and Libra in the 4th, not using the whole sign. You have the North Node, Sun, and Chiron all in Libra. So there's this mission. There's a mission here. Whenever we have the North Node, there's communication of a high nature because Mercury is in its domicile, and it's understanding this, what's going on in this house is going to help you in the future. It's at 29 degrees as part of fortune. I really haven't talked much about that. But your part of fortune is literally what we do there is round up. It's the 30th degree of Virgo. And the 29th degree is not a stable degree. So you are changing. I would have to say there was a fortune change, I had to call that, in your lineage in the fourth house having to do with your parents, and specifically with wounds that you experienced. And it's in Libra. So in order to understand what Chiron does in Libra, you would have to look at what Libra represents. And so the planet ruling your Chiron is Venus. And I think you know what Venus has to do with, right? We did a podcast on it, but you want to talk about Venus for a minute?
It's just relationships, the feminine and also fiery energy, Netzach on the tree of life, but just very generally, relationships doesn't have to be romantic necessarily. Just a literal relationships, friendships, any relations between people, sociability.
Right. It's the seventh house Libra. It's the rising or the descending, I should say, to go back down. So the descendant is where Libra lives. And Venus represented in her. Now she also rules Taurus. So we've got themes of money loosely tied in here, but not heavily. We would have to look at transits in the second house and what's going on there. But with it being a Libra, Venus is interested in the capacity to share love, partnership, ideas, even because when we bring in another, we bring in a whole bunch of information and situations when we bring in another. So it's this wanting to get close, this capacity to love another person and our values. And Venus itself, the sign it's in will show your attitudes and your needs in love, something that you're looking to grow in and change. And the house shows what you value most and attract to yourself. So think about this, your Venus, Libra's ruling planet of Chiron, because it's in Libra, we have to put it in that energy and layer, is in the third house in Virgo.
Right.
Now we
I didn't
know,
know. Yeah.
Virgo has its fall, Venus has its fall. And the way that works is each sign is a planet where it's exalted and where its energy is pure and elevated to the level of perfection, so they say. And a sign complement is where a planet's energy is positive. And if a planet is the opposite sign of its exaltation, it is in fall and dishonor. So that's why Venus falls in Virgo. And detriment is when a sign is opposite its rulership. It's weak, negative, or repressed. So the fall just means it has to try harder because it's an opposite. So it has to try a little harder to bridge that gap. But it doesn't mean it can't. And it also, being in Virgo, what do you value? Venus will show what you value and where you focus. And, Virgo is very pragmatic. It's serious-minded, meticulous, organized, concerned with Earth, right? So it's very practical. So your Venus needs to be practical. And you've got it in Gemini's house. So we have to add that layer. And you begin to see, okay, well, how does this relate to Chiron? Now, it's not making any direct transit or aspect to it. So it really needed to work, I would say. Chiron needs to work a lot to understand, or needed to try to get some understanding around your fourth house, Chiron and Libra. Chiron and Libra would show an underdeveloped sense of self because it's opposite Aries. And it could also show Libra struggle with codependency. And so much wanting to be in harmony with another, they won't stand up for themselves and they can become codependent.
Oh yeah, I definitely do
So
that. And just recently I've been starting to put my foot down.
that's important for a Libra because you can be a pushover. Because you have this desire there with a Libra sun and a Libra Chiron. Man, you could really overlook a lot of wounds that people cause you. Like you could take it too far. And your North Node is in Libra, so this lifetime, you're trying to bring in some balance and harmony in your relationships that you did not have before. And we know this because you have your moon, which represents the past, in Aries. This is just crazy how that works out in your chart. The opposite of Libra. So this is from really quick. The Chiron Effect, Healing Our Core Wounds Through Astrology, Empathy, and Self-Forgiveness by Lisa Taher, licensed social worker and astrologer. She says this on page 139 of Chiron in Libra. The psychoastrology of Chiron and Libra represents the shift from a disempowered identity to one that is strong and has flexible yet protective boundaries. So putting those boundaries in place this lifetime, especially with it in your North Node, would have meant that you were born where you didn't feel maybe those things were in place because you wouldn't have this need to do that unless they weren't there or unless there was a prior karmic attachment, which the North Node is opposite the South Node and the South Node is in Aries. You see? You have something going on in this lifetime with your individual self really rising up in a balanced way, putting protective boundaries out and saying, you know, I'm okay. I can do this on my own. I have worth. And in the ways that I rely maybe on someone else, I need to make sure that that's in balance. And it's not wrong to do that because after all, Libra is all about partnerships. Chiron and Libra influence was demonstrated when the US government initiated internal policy by taking proactive steps to increase our country's presence through attending the UN General Assembly meeting in 1946. In similar fashion to protect government intelligence, President Harry S. Truman established the CIA in 1947. This was all when Chiron was in Libra. Both of these historical events demonstrate the healing potential of Chiron and Libra's core wounding by first defining what is needed, expressively articulating those needs, and then putting the necessary mechanism in place to execute them. Here are some important questions to ask yourself if you have Chiron in Libra. Do you feel a sense of lack in the development of your personal independence? Do you feel alone and undervalued when you're not in an intimate relationship? When you are in an intimate relationship, do you struggle with an undeveloped sense of self? Your core identity that leads you to sacrifice your true opinions and needs in order to maintain that relationship. Are you painted by wondering how to maintain boundaries between your true self and your relational self? So the deep challenge here is a level of the heart. And that's, you know, I'm going to end there. But I think she pulls that out really well of, you know, remember, Libra is opposite Aries. Chiron is where? In Aries. So you would have some themes here going on in your personal life, probably from another that are dealing with your need to assert yourself in a way that Anthony, those have been our conversations, man. You know,
Yeah. So specifically,
like what
what
just happened,
undermines
you know.
what So I
Go ahead.
find specifically what undermines my sense of self is that actually the very almost the scientific mindset in a way, right? Because the true scientific mindset is you're always supposed to be trying to figure out why you're wrong, how you could be wrong. So I've always struggled to stand on what I know and fight for argue what I know and what I believe in because I'm always questioning, well, am I wrong? I'm still kind of young. I don't know everything. But now I'm coming to the point where I've done, at least on certain areas, I've done a lot of research. Like one specific example, I'm coming to a point with Christianity where I'm just done hearing out Christian ideas. And like I said, I've always had the point of view of it's very important to listen to those you disagree with. You always need to try to figure out why you're wrong. But I've spent hours and hours researching and getting the best arguments for these Christian ideas and throwing these ideas around in my head, and I know that it is a philosophy that is not coherent, it is contradictory, it does not hold any water. I don't I'm done hearing it out. Right? When I hear someone talking about their Christian ideas, I know some of it is good, but ultimately when you put them all together, they don't make sense with each other. It's an incoherent philosophy. I've done I've done the research. I've heard out the opposing side, and I'm done considering could I be wrong on that. I'll reconsider it in the future, come back to it, but I'm coming to the point where I'm done questioning myself. Am I wrong? Am I wrong? Am I wrong? Am I wrong? No, there are some things I actually know a lot about now. And it's also just basic things like I know I don't deserve to be treated in a certain way. I know what the basic dignity and respect that everyone deserves is. And I don't have to deal with not receiving that. Just the basic amount of dignity and human respect that's needed to be civil. So
Yeah.
yeah, everything you said is true. You're the best.
Well, Lisa said that Lisa to her licensed social worker. So all credits to her for the Chiron effect. Check out that book. There's something that Peter Dinklage said as well, which kind of I forgot to read this quote, but I saw it sitting here when you were speaking, and how you really embodied this. You had that Chiron and Aries opposite Libra. So perhaps because he was born a dwarf, he had to be fierce like that to make it. You know what I'm saying? But he said this: to find real peace, you have to let the armor go. Your need for acceptance can make you invisible in this world. Don't let anything stand in the way of the light that shines through this form. Risk being seen in all your glory. And I think, I know some Libras besides you, and every one of them that I know has compromised and not stood up, and risk being seen in all your glory, risk saying, look, there are some things I do know, and it doesn't make me cocky and it doesn't make me prideful. It just makes me educated. And that education has transformed my life for good.
Yeah. And on that
Because
point, exactly when it comes to, people who just aren't awake, people who think the government would never do anything to hurt them and there's, at no corruption in government and things like that. Like I've told myself, I've said the words for a long time. These people are like children. They really haven't progressed past high school. They don't know anything, but I haven't really internalized it because I still get frustrated when these sheep act like sheep. I still get frustrated when these adults that I know are mentally children act like children, and then it finally hit me, like, what am I doing? Like, I've been saying these people are like children for years. I wouldn't get mad at a child for not knowing things because they're a child. So why am I still getting frustrated? It's because I was still giving people the benefit of the doubt, I guess, still stuck in this old mindset. Like, oh, if I can see it, other people can see it. It doesn't take that much. Like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure these things out. But to many people, it may as well be rocket science. The truth is, a lot of people have not matured or learned very much since they got out of high school. Like that's the truth. Well, a lot of people are mentally children, and I'm finally just starting to fully accept it and start to, like, not get angry when these adult children act like children, because they're just children.
Well, there's a whole cognitive dissonance we talked about in the Christianity episode prior to
Yeah.
this one that we did. And, we went down that road. And hey, I am really grateful for the people that wouldn't let me stay asleep. And that kept, there are a handful of people that put information in my hand and, woke me up by reading how our economic system really works. I didn't know a lot. And as I began to read, it began to, and here's the other thing. I wonder how many people, I don't know, it's not said, but we have to look at, the nature of how things go down and how many people, when they found out that Chiron, ended his life, how many people around him just didn't, what would they have said to him? It was like, it was the thing that he needed to do to finally transmute out of this pain. And he knew what he needed to do. And, he wasn't saying it was for everyone, but he wasn't stopped by anyone. And he doesn't appear to have been challenged by anyone for 900 years. So there's this maybe cognitive dissonance was in society then too, to, not deal with the true nature, not really go to the root of it and not do what needs to be done. I don't know. Maybe I'm just drawn too much from that, but
No, I don't think so. I
I
think you're on to it.
I res I respect the people like you who have been reading and who are wide open, because you are. You may be emphatic and strong about your opinion because you earned it. You didn't once know these things. And so when, we take the time to study and read and grow, it costs us something, and we can be protective of it, but we need to be able to stand our own, going back to this, theme of Libra in Chiron, and be able to stand there in the midst of a family meeting or a family gathering or a business meeting even, and be able to truly say what you want to say and not have a fear that you're going to be rejected, or, and education will do that. You learn and you're like, wow, like you said, I'm moving past the anger, but you do have this transit going on of Pluto transiting your 8th house that is hitting your Uranus natal position in your 8th house and past, but it's going to go into retrograde. And that would be some serious intensity about things of 8th house matter and Aquarian matters, and bringing out the truths, bringing out, reality. Like you said, some things you can know are now. But I do want to say this transit for you outside of your chart now, what's happening right now, this isn't the progress chart. I didn't progress it. I went to your natal blueprint, but it's all happening in your midheaven. Saturn is hitting your midheaven in Pisces. And then you have Mars Neptune, the North Node, Mercury, all in your 10th house. Hitting your North Node in Aries is hitting your South Node in Aries. And this is a review of your independent nature, hands down, in the way that you have asserted yourself on this planet or not asserted. It has to do with your physical body. So your physical body being moved around with people in relationships on this earth, wherever you go, whatever you do. It's a public house, so it's going to be seen. So this could tie to your career. And Saturn is there. You have Saturn on Saturn, almost. Saturn is in Pisces, and you've got a Saturn in Aries. So you're making your way towards your Saturn return friend that's going to be occurring. Saturn is sneaking up on you slowly, inch by inch, doing his work in Pisces. And then in the 11th house, next to Mercury in the 10th, 5 degrees away in Aries, you have your Chiron in your 11th, Venus, part of Fortune, the Sun, Uranus, and Jupiter. 10th is opposite of the 4th. So your Chiron is being lit up by Saturn, Mars, Neptune, the North Node, and Mercury in a very visible place as I speak. And what are you doing right now in a very visible place? You are talking about your Chiron. Another me opposite is talking about your Chiron.
I've been standing up to family, standing up to work, getting raises, standing up to these Christians with their illogical philosophies. Been doing all that lately.
And we have to understand that that adversity is needed and it's not a bad thing. And we have to be able to have these Libra, air, highly intellectual sign, very smart sign, have its way of, can we just talk about this? Like I can see you exasperated in the past. Like,
yeah,
can we just fucking talk? Can we just talk about this? It's like, let's just
these
talk.
fucking
this
words printed on
energy.
these fucking pages.
Let's just talk. Okay, so yeah, that's what you're going through there, my brother. It is heavily lighting up transits 10th and 11th house. And it already, your Chiron, you would have had Chiron there a while ago, but it's passed. I'm going to go to my chart to close out here and talk about that for a minute. Oh, did you have any questions before I do that on your chart?
No, it all makes sense.
Fast. I alluded to a little bit of my background. I was born July 19th, 1963, 2:50 p.m. So my Chiron, like I said, is in Pisces, showing up in my 4th house of home. And it is in it's in a lot of aspects here. And I didn't go over your aspects that yours was in very strongly, but mine is in a grand water trine from the 4th to the 8th to the 12th. I have Pisces hitting Cancer in the 8th because it shares Cancer with the 8th and 9th, and going back to Neptune, Scorpio in the 12th. So there's a real, when you have this trine, several ways to look at this. My ability to heal, my ability to use this energy in a healing way, my ability to bring this up to the highest of the high is there. I'm going to be, especially with the Scorpio ascendant, this is going to be healed. I have my Venus and my Moon conjunct in Cancer in the 8th house, tying me back to 4th house themes where Chiron sits in Pisces, throwing me back over to Neptune, who is ruling Pisces in Scorpio. So you can see this theme of me doing what I'm doing right now, which is being healed and then talking about it in a free-flowing way through my soul, because my sun is in Cancer as well. theme of Pisces has to do with Neptune, and has to do with, because it's in the home, has to do with potentially tied to alcohol. Neptune is represented by Pisces, and Pisces is ruled by Jupiter and Neptune. And Neptune in the shadow can be too much water, too much overindulgence in too much water, too much alcohol, escapism can be rampant. I was born through an alcoholic father. So alcoholism was rampant in my lineage, not just my father, but all around me. Uncles and aunts, and my grandfather as well, and more than likely his father. So we've got ancestry to do with a misuse of Piscean, Neptunian, escapism nature. And I was greatly affected by that as a child, as being born from an alcoholic father is a huge disadvantage. I also witnessed great violence being done to my mother in the home in a horrendous way. I also was sexually molested from ages 3 to 17. So a lot of core wounding here in the fourth house for me, where Chiron and Pisces would feel victimized and can get caught in escapism, addictive habits due to being a victim. Often, so see someone who has Neptune on the ascendant, Neptune in the first, like I do, Neptune on the ascendant, right on the ascendant within minutes of my ascendant, not even, less than a minute, and they would have been conjunct the same degree. You're going to find people who are mystics, or people that often go alone and are by themselves alone, and are willing to be the sacrificial lamb. Therefore, they have been victimized. They're willing to take the really difficult, challenging things and elevate them up and transmute them to the highest vibration and get out of this victimization and become the savior, so to speak. Neptune attaches to Pisces, which attaches to Jesus Christ. So there's this also being overly selfless. This has been my experience with my immediate family, and something I have learned that because I lacked a lot of love there, I think I was trying to make up for it in my relationships with other people by, doing for them so that they would love me. I really see that was a theme, and I have use substances, not in an addictive form, but in ways to escape. There's no doubt about it. And it's something that, I was challenged with there for a while. But a healed Chiron here is going to be able to create those healthy boundaries. And Neptune is boundless. So it can go way, way out there. And it can be so heavenly minded, it's no earthly good. And it isn't able to nurture itself when it's way out there like that. It's got to ground itself and find balance, and all that heavy water, be able to interrelate. And so it needs to be nurturing towards the self. It needs to learn to trust its intuition. It needs to understand that it is a highly psychic placement when you're dealing with Neptune on the ascendant. And Neptune is squaring over there the fourth house. So not a comfortable placement on the cusp, but where my position of Chiron is, it's past the cusp. So it ends up, speaking of the ability, because the trine is there, the harmonious degree, but being able to overcome this. Now, my Chiron is trine the moon, trine Neptune, my ascendant it's in harmonious aspect with my descendant, and it's in harmonious aspect with the astrologer asteroid called Urania. It is opposite my 10th house, and in my 10th house is Virgo with Pluto. So this is the opposite, which was the 10th house, which was my father, who's represented by the 10th house, often my authority figure, opposing me. And not just him, but the masculine in general. And Pluto represents themes of sexuality, themes we know Hades raped Persephone's. Yes, he did. So all of these darker energies that need soul evolution and transmutation were all done in my home, in secret and in private. And now with my Pluto in Virgo, my Uranus in Virgo in my birth chart, with Mars there in Virgo, I am speaking about the very things that occurred to me in a very public way through Virgo, which is the healer, which is wanting to bring health to it, which is wanting to make it okay through Cancer Sun, Cancer Moon, Cancer Venus, Cancer North Node that I have. And so you see all this play out in a very harmonious way, but it's taken me a long time to get here, a very, very long time. I turned 60 in July. So I had my Chiron return at 50, and that would have been about 10 years ago. And that was when my shift in the holistic field happened. And that's all under review this lifetime as it's in retrograde. So there's a lot more to be said of that. But my Pisces in Chiron is very, very true to the experiences that I've had in my healing journey. Any comments on that? And I'm going to close with some remedies.
No comments.
What we can do with Aries and Chiron, as we have this energy to 2026. We're needing to learn how to assert ourselves with active awareness. So this is dealing with the head, because Aries represents the head. So it's the recognition that we possess of our own unique head, our own unique body, our needs and our wants, and being able to, without being a hothead, with maintaining balance in our minds, in our heads, being able to assert ourselves, and also being willing to assert yourself, because Aries is very assertive and he's calling on us to say, let's clean up these wounds. And this is why we're seeing the exposure of the way that we are in our society over many, many areas. And so if you have you can tell that you're really challenged with this energy if you've got headaches and migraines and head colds and ear infections. And you know, a lot of those show up where your Aries is in your chart. So this isn't just tied to Chiron. Wherever your Aries is, you could experience these teeth grinding infections, irritated sinuses, facial blemishes. You know that my face broke out as I started studying Chiron and Aries, and my face never breaks out like this, and I can't figure it out. And here it is. I know it's the craziest thing, and I read it that you can have facial blemishes. I kid you not. I've got blemishes right under my mouth.
Oh wow!
I don't know what the hell's going on.
Now you mention it, I've had this big red spot on my face that hasn't gone away, like pre Whitehead, just this big red bump that won't go away for the last week or two.
Oh wow. Well, how about now that it's out of retrograde and Chiron is moving forward? Let's see what happens here with our face in your red bump. Okay, so remember humility here too, because the ram might explode with association. It could really plow over people. And so there's something to be said here If you have an explosive Aries, you'll find that you probably have diminished hearing. Again, migraines play into this. A lot of tooth pain. I got to tell you, my left top tooth has been bothering me too. And that just started about 3 weeks ago. It's crazy. But some exercises you can do are head nods. Head nods, just standing there and doing head nods. And, affirming your individuality and allowing your true self to rise up and be healed. Also, standing forward and folding straight down as an exercise. And this is from Your Body and the Stars, the Zodiac as Your Wellness Guide. Stephanie Morando, MD, RYT, and Rebecca Gordon. This is page 21, and it's standing forward to fold and renew your sense of self and surroundings. So basically, you stand up straight, your head several times, you shake your head no, and you nod your head again yes, and you bend down and you place your hands on the floor or as close as you can, and you just inhale in and inhale out slowly, and you allow the blood to rush to your head. This will actually rebalance. So that's just a couple things that you can do. And an I am exercise for confidence in who you are is remembering your motto, I am. And she says, Aries mathematician, philosopher Rene Descartes says, I think, therefore I am. I think, therefore I am. So it's finding your identity and your true authenticity. And in order for that, sometimes things have to go. And we are seeing that happen very clearly within the entertainment industry in recent, since Aries has been in Chiron since 2018, more and more of this stuff is coming out, and it's pretty explosive, as Aries is. So that's all I have. The unbearable curse, the poison one, the afflicted, the scapegoat, the rejoice, the abandoned, the alienated, the hero, the overcomer, the triumphant, the exalted, centaur, Chiron. Good night.
Good night.